Conrad Black joins us now from his home in Toronto. Mr. Black, do you believe the positive things you've written about Donald Trump played a role in you receiving this presidential pardon?
He assured me that they didn't, but I would say, not that this was exactly what you asked, if I was one of those who slagged him off every week and suggested that he was a Russian asset committing treasonous acts against his country, I think that even though the legal facts would have been the same, I think he might not have been particularly interested in examining the file. But he assured me that the fact that we'd been cordial acquaintances for 20 years and that I'd been relatively supportive of him, which he thanked me for, was not the reason. He was very explicit and very clear and urged me to make it clear that the reason that he did this, his motivation was that it was, and I'm quoting him, a bad rap, an unjust verdict, and that I should never have been charged. And that was the view of the White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, and of their legal staff after carefully analyzing the material that Alan Dershowitz and others submitted on my behalf.
After a long and very convoluted process, U.S. courts ultimately did rule that you were guilty of fraud and obstruction of justice. Do you believe that this pardon is an exoneration?
It is an exoneration, and what you just said isn't quite true. Or at least it's not the whole truth. They started with 17 counts. They abandoned 4. The jurors pitched 9. The Supreme Court of the United States unanimously vacated the remaining 4, but in a peculiar American process that would not occur in this country or any other civilized jurisdiction, they remanded back to lower court judges whom they had severely criticized and effectively overturned the consideration of, and I quote, the gravity of their own errors. And in that process, which has to be seen as a somewhat self-serving one, 2 charges were retrieved. One of them was the improper receipt of money that was voted by independent directors and was put up in public filings of the company twice, and that was found by the trial judge in respect of my co-defendant, the company secretary, to be a clerical error, but was redeemed as a crime for me, and I was a completely passive person in it. And the other was the spurious nonsense of obstruction, where I helped take out of my office that I was moving from after 27 years, boxes that it was demonstrated in court contained either irrelevant material in respect of the legal proceedings or material that we had already given to the Securities and Exchange Commission under the scrutiny of cameras that I myself had installed to make sure there was no suggestion of doing anything stealthy or surreptitious. So what you said has some technical accuracy, but it's not a straight conviction by any means. It's the questionable and self-interested retrieval of 2 charges that had been vacated by the Supreme Court, and the retrieval of it by a panel of appellate judges and a trial judge that the Supreme Court severely criticized. And the finding of the White House counsel and the legal department of the executive branch was that none of those charges should ever have been laid.
You talked about the president saying that the pardon had nothing to do with the positive things that you have written about him, but the president has a history of pardoning political supporters. Does that at all taint this pardon for you?
No. There's nothing to do with it. And it's not as if those are the only people he pardons. He's pardoned, I think he's only pardoned about 8 or 10 people. You might consider that sheriff in Arizona to be a political supporter of his, but as far as I know, that's the only one, and my position is hardly comparable to that. There's no such pattern, particularly in what he's done, and in any case, I have to take him at his word and the word of the very gracious release made by the White House last night.
The president has long complained about...
This is a little like... Go ahead.
I'll let you finish your answer, Mr. Black.
Well, I was just going to say, this is a little like, Dr. Freud saying sometimes a cigar isn't a phallic symbol, sometimes it's just a cigar. I mean, not everything Donald Trump does is an act of vengeance or favoritism. I mean, sometimes he just tries to do his job like the rest of us.
Mr. Trump has long complained about a quote-unquote witch hunt against him. Do you think that he sees some similarities in what you went through?
Yes, I think so. And of course, we had to some degree the same personalities that we were dealing with. And he, let us face facts. You and your viewers may formulate whatever view you want about what his motivations were with me, but nobody now can dispute that allegation that he had collaborated with the Russian government to rig a presidential election was absolutely unfounded. It was outrageous, and the dirtiest political trick in American history was the Steele dossier, a pastiche of lies and defamations that the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee paid $10 million to confect, and then sponsored an echo chamber between the intelligence agencies and parts of the Justice Department to get it into the media and create a completely otiose and superfluous special counsel investigation that was riveted on the president's back for 2 years. So having gone through all that and being in any case litigiously experienced, I think that there's probably some merit in what you said. I think he felt that he'd been there to a degree and knew what it was like.
Another similarity that strikes me is on obstruction. The initial fraud charges against you were dropped, but yet a conviction on obstruction with the caveats that you put in place that you mentioned. In Mr. Trump's case, in the president's case, you have no collusion, but a certain opening and a lot of discussion about the fact that there may have been obstruction by the president.
Where is the question?
Do you think that
What are you asking me?
Do you think that he sees that as a similarity between the two of you?
I'd be mind reading. I'm not sure. He didn't mention that. I mean, the fact is, I don't think he takes the suggestions of obstruction against himself at all seriously, and nor should he. The Attorney General was perfectly clear in his 4-page summary of the findings that the 3 elements of obstruction under U.S. jurisprudence and both the wording and the interpretation of the statute are a corrupt act for a corrupt purpose in contemplation of a legal proceeding, and that none of those elements was present in the president's case. And the attempt to create an obstruction argument out of the 10 points that Mueller listed is just nonsense. I mean, it was the best the special counsel could do to find some excuse for having wasted everyone's time and money for 2 years.
This pardon, how does it change your life, or does it?
Yeah, I think it does. As a practical matter, if I wanted to go to the United States, I could have done it, but I had to apply. And because of the outrageous way I was treated by the legal system of that country, I was not prepared to apply for the great privilege of entering the country. But now, officially in the United States, I was never charged, and I am free to enter the country as I always was before. And as a practical matter, it is a great country. And while I lived quite happily these past 7 years without setting foot there, it's nice to be able to go there. And there are lots of places in the United States I'm happy to go to. And I have a lot of friends in that country. And the other thing is the one we touched on earlier. The fact is, this has been a very long battle, and you will recall, at least I imagine you would, I'm not sure how long you've been following the news, but 14, 15, 16 years ago, there was immense controversy and a tremendous amount of extremely hostile publicity inciting the belief that I was an embezzler and really a terribly unethical person. And we, as I say, we beat down sequentially every part of those allegations And this is the final dismissal of them by what is, in fact, the ultimate legal authority in that country.
Conrad Black, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Alan.